Hi, I'm Dr. Vanita Rattan. I'm a doctor, but I'm also a cosmetic formulator specifically for skin of color. So today's video is about how to treat melasma for skin of color. So melasma are basically the dark marks that happen. They start 80% of melasma starts on the cheekbones, the zygoma area, and then spreads to other parts of the face. So it can spread to the forehead, the upper lip area, the chin area. And it can be quite distressing. It's quite common for skin of color and in females, specifically if you live in a hot country. If you haven't worn sunscreen, your whole life, then it can start as early as in your mid-20s and then can get worse and worse. So really the trick is, number one, with our children, to make sure that they're wearing sunscreen from 6 months old onwards. Our children are going to have much better skin than us. I know I didn't start wearing sunscreen until much later on, end of my 20s, when I actually started noticing early melasma on my own face. So this is actually the reason I became a cosmetic formulator, was because of hyperpigmentation on my own skin and realizing actually there wasn't much available for skin of color. And unfortunately, the vast majority of treatments that were made for pigmentation actually worsened hyperpigmentation for skin of color, because if it was too irritating or caused too much inflammation, it triggered your cells further and actually pigmentation became darker. And so this video is very dear to me because I know just how painful this chronic condition is, because I've suffered with it and I've been managing it my whole life. And so I want to impart exactly what's going on with your skin. I want you to understand what's making it worse, how to treat it, the key actives. There's a lot of marketing out there for treating melasma, but actually don't contain the key ingredients. And so I want you to be empowered and have the knowledge to be able to look at the back of ingredients and realize what you should be purchasing and what you should maybe avoid. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into this video. Before I do, I want you to know I'm in the comment section for 1 hour at the launch of every single video. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know that I'm here. I also answer a lot of questions on my Instagram. I've got 2 accounts, Skincare by Dr. V and Dr. Vanita Rattan. I'm also on TikTok, Dr. Vanita Rattan too. I also made you a free ebook, a free guide for 2022 skincare. And the link is down below. You may have downloaded last year's guide. I try and update it every year for you to make sure you have cutting edge information. If that sounds good to you, give me a thumbs up. Let's dive right in. Right, so let's start off with what you're likely to have seen. You're likely to have seen these cute freckles that start here. And I thought that mine were also cute freckles until my mum pointed out, no, that's early sun damage and it means that you haven't been protecting your skin. And she was correct. And so I want you guys to be aware and actually inspect your own skin, because this is a warning sign to you that you haven't been looking after your melanocytes. The reason why skin of color gets more melasma than Caucasian skin is because our melanocytes are larger. Those are cells that produce the pigment melanin. They are easier to trigger. So when UV hits the skin, our melanocytes start to produce hyperpigmentation. Whereas in Caucasian skin, it takes a lot longer to get to that point. There's a bit of a gray area when it comes to European olive-based skin, because this type of skin is actually classed as skin of color because they get melasma, but they may not identify as people of color. So there's a difference between skin of color and people of color. Skin of color is if you're more likely to tan rather than burn in the sun. And that means you need to take more care of your skin. Now, there are 3 main influences as to your likelihood of getting melasma. Number 1 is genetic factors. If your parents, if the females in your family have melasma, you're more likely to get it. So looking at your mum and your aunts. Number 2 is UV exposure. If you haven't been wearing your sunscreen your whole life, you're more likely to get it. And if you live in a hot country with a high UV index, you're more likely to get it. This is why it's so prevalent in Australia, for example, where the ozone is thinner, UV is stronger, the UV index is stronger, and so melasma is rampant. Number 3 is estrogen. Estrogen sensitizes the cell, the melanocyte, to UV, and this is why it's worse for females than males. It's worse when you're on the pill, when you're going through pregnancy, or when you're going through menopause. So you may be asking yourself, but Dr. V, how exactly does UV rays lead to melasma? So what happens is when UV rays hits the skin, free radicals form in the skin. A free radical is when an atom has lost an electron and it goes berserk and it starts stealing electrons from other atoms. And now you have a cascade of free radicals in your skin. Now, a number of things happen at this point. It damages your collagen, so this leads to aging, premature aging, which is why if you've been in the sun without protecting your skin, you age much faster. And number two is it triggers the melanocyte, the cells producing the pigment melanin. This is why even 5 minutes in the sun, when you have melasma, without wearing your mineral SPF 50, like our Inzincable, will worsen your pigmentation. Just 5 minutes. You can actually feel, when I'm driving, I can actually feel my melanocytes tingling, and I can feel that they're going to be darker the next day. I can feel my pigmentation darker the next day. It's that quick. If you guys have melasma, can you write down below if you can feel the same thing? You can literally feel while you're driving UV hitting the skin and your skin tingling where the melasma is and noticing darker pigmentation the next day too. The next question is, okay, right, Dr. V, how do we treat it? So there are a number of professional grade treatments, but they're not all suitable for skin of color, and let me explain why. Let's start off with laser. I would avoid high energy ablative laser, also known as Fraxel laser, that will burn the top layer of skin away. You may have seen this on TikTok or Instagram. It's very visual and it's resurfacing of the skin, but it's too harsh for skin of color, and it can lead to widespread hyperpigmentation because you're basically putting high energy onto the skin, which can trigger the melanocytes. That's okay for, Fitzpatrick 1 and 2, lighter skin, but I really wouldn't recommend that for Fitzpatrick 3, 4, 5, 6, so darker skin. The second treatment is microdermabrasion, which gives you temporary results. You're basically taking away the top layer of dead skin, but your skin is a living organ, so your skin is going to grow back. And if you haven't treated that root cause, which is a hyperactive melanocyte, you basically just have a conveyor belt of skin cells that keeps coming to the surface. So you have to treat that. Otherwise, no matter how much you keep taking the top layer of skin away with chemical peels or with microdermabrasion, your skin cells, your pigmentation is just going to keep coming back. So you will see a temporary brightening with microdermabrasion or chemical peels, but it's not going to give you long-term results. And now when it comes to chemical peels, the ones that you must avoid would be TCA peels or high-strength glycolic acid, unless you really know, the person you're dealing with really understands skin of color, because these can both burn the skin and they can both lead to PIH, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. So I just wouldn't recommend them for skin of color. And last but not least is hydroquinone. So hydroquinone, I'm not a fan of, even though it's a gold standard, even though the most number of clinical studies have been done on hydroquinone, because of rebound hyperpigmentation that can happen with hydroquinone. Hydroquinone, you get great results initially while you're on it, but once you come off of it, often pigmentation comes back and comes back worse. And so I'd rather you did nothing than to potentially make the situation worse. And this is a reason I prefer tyrosinase inhibitors in a cocktail. So when you're using multiple tyrosinase inhibitors, about between 8 to 12, in combination synergistically, to gently reduce your hyperpigmentation, so the rate of melanin production in the melanocyte, but without irritating the skin and leading to further pigmentation or rebound hyperpigmentation. So about 15 years ago, when I first started researching hyperpigmentation for skin of color, I would look at single actives and what the effect would be at different percentages on hyperpigmentation for skin of color. And you would get hardly any shifting of pigmentation with 1 or 2 actives. And it only really started, you only started to get decent reduction in pigmentation without irritation at approximately 10 tyrosinase inhibitors working in their therapeutic index. So each percentage active had to be at a certain percentage in order for it to work. So the question you're probably asking at this point is, but Dr. V, what exactly is a tyrosinase inhibitor? So tyrosinase is the enzyme that oxidizes tyrosine to melanin. That is the key enzyme that catalyzes that reaction. If you can control that enzyme, you control the rate of melanin production. And so tyrosinase inhibitors basically work on that enzyme. Now, tyrosinase can be triggered by internal or external factors. So external factors would be things like UV radiation, which we've discussed. It could be an insect bite. It could be a cut, trauma. It could be a chemical burn. It can be from friction, such as the inner thigh or knees, when you're dark knees that can happen when you're kneeling a lot, or toes that rub on shoes. It can also happen from cosmetics if you've reacted to something, such as lips can lead into lip hyperpigmentation. And then you also have internal triggers. So this would be things like estrogen. So when you go through puberty, for example, you get darkening of the pubic area, you get darkening around the mouth area. You can get hereditary darkening, such as dark circles, which tends to run in the family. Also, any inflammation of the skin. So eczema, for example, if you have eczema and you have itchiness on your inner arms, that can lead to, inner elbows, it can lead to hyperpigmentation. Or acne. So again, it's inflammation of the skin, which then leads to dark marks. So all of these things basically can trigger the melanocyte and lead to hyperpigmentation. But if you can control that enzyme, so using tyrosinase inhibitors, you can reverse hyperpigmentation in skin of color. Now I'm going to go through step by step how hyperpigmentation forms. Because if you understand this, then treating it is going to be relatively straightforward. So first thing that happens is inflammation of the skin. This can happen from lots of things that we've already discussed, such as a cut, a mosquito bite, from UV rays, or an acne spot. This increases the production of tyrosinase, which means that there's increased melanin production in the melanocyte. Now this melanin is parceled into cute little parcels called melanosomes. Those then pass into the surrounding skin cells called keratinocytes. These skin cells then, like a conveyor belt, come all the way to the surface until you can see it at the top. Once these skin cells come to the surface of the skin, it's seen as hyperpigmentation. I'm now going to go through some of my favorite tyrosinase inhibitors for skin of color. So I love retinoids, so that's the whole vitamin A family. I love alpha-arbutin. It's very effective at 2%, but without irritating the skin, so I prefer it to hydroquinone. Kojic acid, or better than that, it would even be kojic dipalmitate, because it's less irritating. It's a derivative of kojic acid, but is as effective. Vitamin C, I love different forms of vitamin C derivatives of it, such as sodium ascorbyl phosphate or tetrahexyldecylascorbate, which I formulate a lot with. Vitamin E, which you're going to find in basically all of your skincare, because it's the most popular skincare ingredient in the world. But it's also a very good antioxidant. I love green tea extract because it's soothing and also tyrosinase inhibitor. And I love licorice root extract as well. It's effective, but without irritating the skin. So I tend to formulate with all of these, plus I use niacinamide. So niacinamide, what it does is, remember I told you melanosomes go from the melanocyte to the skin cells around it. It prevents that transfer. So it's just another stage of the pathway of melanin production. So in our Dr. V kit, I tend to formulate with 10 tyrosinase inhibitors for pigmentation for skin of color. But this is not your first product you should put on the skin, because it's expensive. This is what you use if nothing else works. I always say start cheap. So the products I would recommend to start with if you have hyperpigmentation is, I like the 2% alpha-arbutin from The Ordinary. I like tranexamic acid from the Inkey list. So do one at a time first. Then I like a discoloration serum from Good Molecules. If you live in India, I like alpha-arbutin from Be Minimalist. If you live in South Africa, I like Skin Functional Doc Mark Management. If this doesn't work, then you want to upgrade, then you can upgrade to the Facial Pigmentation Kit. So this basically contains 10 tyrosinase inhibitors, and it's been designed specifically for skin of color with all the actives in the therapeutic index. But this is not your first port of call because it's expensive. It's £100 for the kit. So start cheap. If that doesn't work, then you have an option. And this is the reason I made it, is because there was nothing from over the counter to £1,000 in clinic treatment. So I wanted to give you an option to have something that was effective for pigmentation for skin of color without having to go into clinic. Now, if you're using a vitamin A product, so a lot of the products I've discussed have got vitamin A in them, including our one, you should really be using a fatty moisturizer on top. So for example, you may decide to go with Cetrabem, which I like. I also like CeraVe. If you're looking for a fatty moisturizer that's anti-aging and for hyperpigmentation, then you can use the Cera-Pep Brightening Moisturizer, which is from our range, which has got licorice root extract in it and niacinamide too. The most important thing, however, is your SPF 50, and I always recommend zinc oxide because it's anti-inflammatory. So considering this whole thing is happening because of inflammation, anti-inflammatory is ideal. So for example, this is the Dr. V Inzincable SPF 50, which has got 17% zinc oxide in it, plus Melashield, which is a tyrosinase inhibitor that's UV stable, that I'm happy for you to wear during the day. So I'm wearing it on my skin right now under my foundation, and you can see it has no white cast because it's been designed specifically for skin of color, and also contains 2% niacinamide in it too. But whichever SPF 50 you want to wear is absolutely fine. And the other thing that I made specifically for my face, but apparently everyone else wanted it, was our Dr. V anti-melasma sunglasses. So I wear this when I'm driving, and it completely protects my zygoma area. This is the midnight blue color. It's a brand new color that we'll have available later on for you. But for me, it just completely gives me a physical block, because you don't actually know when your sunscreen stops working. Whereas this, I know is on my skin, and I know I'm fully protected and UV can't hit my skin. And this is where it starts. So 80% of melasma starts here and then spreads to the rest of the face. So if you can protect this area, then you have a good chance of protecting the rest of the skin too. So that's the Dr. V sunglasses, and I'll put the link for that down below too. Don't forget, I am in the comment section for 1 hour at the launch of the video, so please do write down your questions about melasma or hyperpigmentation and things that you've struggled with, because in all likelihood, if you've struggled, so is everybody else. We also have a wonderful Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group called Dr. V Sock Family, which is a safe space for you to talk about your pigmentation or skincare issues and upload your photos. And there are thousands of us in this group who really are there to help each other. So please do join if you are looking for that lovely safe space. If you want to learn more about skincare for skin of color, please do get your Skin Revolution book. I've written this and it's been published by HarperCollins. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, and the link is down below too. Any other questions you've got? I can't wait to read them. See you soon. Bye.